Hi, everyone. Welcome to the eighth episode of Conceptualism. Today, with me, I have Sherezad Jamal, who studied architecture, is a practicing artist, and has a business, Free Lion Body Care, which makes handmade uh, products which are influenced by Ayurveda and aromatherapy. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. Whenever we've spoken on the phone, we've always had such wide-ranging and free-thinking conversations, which is exactly why I started this podcast, is have to have these kinds of conversations.
So cool. So I'm really glad to be a part of it.
So tell us about your artistic practice and what your primary medium is.
My primary medium.
Right. If that, I mean,
Um,
I know it's a difficult question because I mean, it seems you're an installation artist, and that could mean so many different things to so many different people. You know.
well, let me put it this way. My artistic practice developed out of my architectural training. So by default, I think in 3D.
Right.
Right. So while I do paint, um, most of my art practice has been about making the object, right? The beautiful usable object. Um, and at the same time, I'm really interested in narrative. What's the story behind the artifact? What's the story? What is the story it is telling us about our experience, about our world, about itself? Um, the narrative really drives a lot of what I do. And so part of my training has been to figure out um, basically visual language and how it works,
Hmm.
right? And to be able to translate from, words to visual.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So I suppose. Uh, so your training is in architecture, but you chose not to go down that path as you know. Uh, I think we were talking about this. You said that you felt that your talent in art or your visual practice could be better served by being an artist rather than purely an architect.
Yeah, because architecture comes with a structure.
Right.
And it at the time that I graduated, which, this is how old I am, people. It's like pre-computer. Okay. So pre-AutoCAD. I graduated drafting on a board. Okay. That's how old I am. And so when I graduated, it was basically still a very patriarchal, star designer driven profession. Like I barely got through being able to do my thesis, um, because I was looking at cultural fusion in architecture, which was, oh my God, for the school that I went to, this was like, oh, how dare you? How can, no, you must assimilate. It was interesting because the policy of, like, what do you call it? The multicultural policy of the land was definitely being enforced through the professional education or through the professional pedagogy. So when I graduated, I had already, because I mean, honestly, it was a tough road getting through those 4 years of architecture school. I mean, I had been failed twice. I had to appeal twice. I had to do extra work. And, everything was, it was a fight and a struggle almost to the end. And the big saving grace at, for the sort of final midterm crit for my thesis, the big saving grace was the head of the master's program at Harvard, who came in to do a guest crit at our architecture school. And it was he who, put the blessing on my project. And why? Because he sat on the board at MIT for the Aga Khan School of Architecture, and he got it. He understood the need for cultural fusion, the need to understand how we are not us and them, how we are just us,
Right,
and
which
how
is
we are connected.
which ties into the concept of otherness, and what does that mean, of
Exactly.
you know
So for me, I had gone through, I mean, I'm giving you the nutshell here, but it was like pretty emotionally traumatic. So by the time I was finished, because, hey, I'm an empath, and I'm an artist, and I'm a sensitive, and like it or not, I came out of it, and I was actually devastated. I needed time to heal.
right,
And I needed time to actually integrate what this experience was and what it meant. So I was not ready. I didn't feel like that was I wasn't ready to go work for an architect, though I did go out and look for an architecture job. I also happened to graduate into a recession, so those were a little bit far and few between. So now I was like, okay, now I've got this education, this design education. What am I going to do with it? And at the time, my then husband, Zul Suleiman, who had graduated from law school, he and I were discussing um, uh, publishing a magazine. Because at that point, we're talking, what are we talking, 1991, 92? No, 91, 1991. We were not seeing images of ourselves out there in the media, in the press, in the, it was like rare to see a movie made by a brown person back then speaking about any kind of diasporic experience, or like that. Like these are like early days. We're talking Mirror films, right? Where like we'd all be like waiting to, oh yay, a Mirror film, now I can see myself on screen. Like it was that, almost as rare as a unicorn. It was that kind of time. So we decided that we needed to do our part in it, and we birthed a magazine called Rung, which still lives online, rung.org, if anybody is interested in checking it out. So at that time period, it was about, so it was a whole design experience of doing this, is trying to use the things that I was really interested in, which was about cultural fusion, right? Because I wasn't just, it was not just for me, it was not just an ideal, it was a lived experience. It
right.
was who I was inside.
It
Right,
was an embodied philosophy. It wasn't just a concept.
absolutely, it was lived. It wasn't just something we talked about. And so in terms of just in terms of the living of it, it was a magazine that the project itself brought people in from different cultures and different backgrounds. We were doing it at as I said, at a time where these things were rare as a unicorn. I think at that time, the only thing that existed, one of the only ones that existed for the South Asian population in Canada was the Toronto South Asian Review. And I'm not talking about the community newspapers. I'm talking about like an intellectual or an art kind of magazine. So that's something that was more aiming at a professional caliber.
Right.
And so
like
the Toronto South Asian,
something that more catered towards the South Asian intelligentsia, I guess, like the professors, the artists, the curators, or do you
yeah,
do you just mean like
it was people who were interested in art and culture at a professional level.
Right. So that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So so this was really a great place for me to use my design education, because one of the things, and I don't know if it is just merely a conceit of the architectural profession, but what I found was that it was true, that it gave you a design education, and if you learned how to, because it was about lateral dot connection, right? So as long as you had the information, the technical specs and the technical information on how to do something, the principles of design were the same, regardless of what you were designing. So, and I'm kind of glad I had that. So here, one thing I was happy for, for that architectural education. I was really happy about that, because what it did was it removed, what do you call it? It removed fear, in a sense.
Right.
It was like, oh yeah, graphic design, no problem. I have an architecture degree. I can do that.
Yeah.
You know, that it was that like that. So we did bring a pretty diverse group of people together. And the time that we were doing this was right in the middle of, 1990s race politics in the arts, or race politics in general. So it was our response to the race politics of 1990s Britain, right? So out of that hotbed came things like Bazaar magazine, like Hanif Qureshi books and films, a lot of like Sunil Gupta photography and community art practice, and what had happened at that time period was that this art, kind of community art practice stuff, and a look at identity from the point of view of the other, all of that was actually being funded for a while in there as a result of these actions that Black artists in Britain were taking at the time. So, and the funding was like a really good level of funding.
Right.
So they had put together, like they'd done a show, like Anish Kapoor, all those guys, right? So they put together a show, which the Vancouver Art Gallery picked up to show, right? So that was our opportunity to come up with our own protest, because it was like, hey, this is great. You're showing work by artists of color, contemporary, varied art practices, varied disciplines, community art practice, which is very much part of what we do, or were, at that point definitely doing, but it is a part of what we do. It was like, hey, that's awesome. That's so great. Thank you. But where's the local color? Right? Where's the artists that actually live and practice in Vancouver? And in fact, that movement was called local color. And so with local color, we basically, what do you call it? Protested they included local color in that show. So that was in the 90s, and then and Rung was a part of that. So we were hosting and representing and writing about and all of those things. Were and definitely meeting other people who, meeting people whose ideas and creativity would eventually become a part of Rung magazine. So that was like one of the projects that came out of doing the architecture degree. And at the same time, in parallel, my art practice as an installation artist started to move,
right.
started to gain some traction.
So would you say then that the magazine was political as well in its like you were making a political statement through the magazine, or
yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
I think this whole idea that people have that politics can be kept separate from art is a ridiculous notion.
Yeah.
Because the word politics itself means the relationship. It's the navigation of a relationship between people. That's what politics means, right? And when we are talking about art, art is also a description of those relationships,
Yes.
and is a description of relationships in different ways. So sometimes it's the relationship with yourself, it's with nature, it's with, you know, other people. So art and politics, I think by default, by definition, cannot be kept separate.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's some artists who claim to be apolitical, or who claim that, you know, that their work is, you know, sort of not overtly or intentionally political. But even that, even saying that your work is apolitical is a political statement, you know?
It
Right.
is. And I think you got to look at who is saying that.
Right. And what their
Who has the
intentions are.
privilege to say that?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It
Yeah,
is. It is.
whatever. You know, like I just think, oh, John Jackson Pollock, my work is not political, right? But yeah, you've got the privilege to say that because you're a white guy throwing paint around in a studio while being slightly drunk. Okay, you get to do that, right? But that is not the reality of everybody who lives on this planet, especially not these days. Especially not these days where privilege is coming under question in such a big freaking way.
It is. Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, and the historically marginalized people, the, you know, people of color, queer people, in Canada, First Nations people, you know, I mean, I think, I mean, it's evolved, and there's been a lot of progress that has been made, but there's so much left to do, so much work. You know, when people say, oh, you know, why are you bothering to go to these protests, or why are you trying to, you know, to say these things that are, you know, difficult, you know, I say, well, first of all, the work is far from done, and really we need people that are passionate and that are able to advocate eloquently, you know, for people that historically and even in the present day don't have a voice, or have less of a voice than the people that generally hold privilege, which is white male people.
I think, you know, yeah, I'm in agreement with you that the the work needs to continue, right? There's, and at the same time, what I'm going to say, built for different types of work, right? So it's not on everybody or for everybody to be out there, right? Because else might be able to um, be as effective by um, I don't know, writing pieces in their local, for their, you know, writing pieces for magazines, papers, or online blogs,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
They might be great. They might do their contribution by doing a podcast.
Hello.
With it's like my specialness, my specialness connecting with yours.
um
Hello?
yeah, the connection, yeah, the connection is
Can you
not
hear
good.
me?
I can hear you now. That you were breaking up.
Okay.
The connection was not good.
No, I guess you'll have to edit, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. um yeah, anyway, sorry, you were saying that okay, so that you don't have to necessarily go to a protest. There's other ways to, you know, to be an advocate. There's other ways to be to take part in the movement, writing
Yeah.
articles, making a podcast, you know, even going behind the scenes and, you know, doing policy work, you know, and changing policies that have to do with you know, whether it's at the government level or
Yeah.
even at the institutional level.
And I'm going to say this too, is that I think that people on both sides have roles to play. It's just as important to have, you know, and this may sound really weird, but it's just as important to have like the negative thing to push against as it is to have the positive advocacy of, no, we can do it a different way.
Right.
Both those things are important, because without the thing to push against, you don't get to figure out what it could be or should be.
Right.
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 And, I sometimes think that, as much as as much as the people who are, stuck and they won't move are difficult, I really have to respect and honor what they represent. Right. Because to me, they represent, okay, so you're the thing that we need to recalibrate for,
Mm-hmm.
or this thing that you represent
Mm-hmm.
is what we have, right? So you have a role. Thank you for playing it. Thank you for so awesomely showing what recalcitrance looks like and what it will do in our world. And thank you, because now I get an idea of how it needs to shift, um, so that the goal of oneness can be reached, in a sense, the unity goal.
Right.
Right? Because for me, that's of in terms of where I fit in the scheme, that's my scheme. That's what I'm interested in. Because
So
I think we've done separations. Is the dance of separation. It's like, okay, thank you, thank you. I'd like to dance together now. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
no, no, not at all. I think that's a really interesting concept that, that we've done this dance of separation. We've done this dance of, of being an individual. The idea of individualism, or putting the needs of the individual above that of the community. And yeah, I think going back to a model where we're thinking about the needs of the collective or the need of the group, is important. Not so much that you totally don't do what you need for yourself. Like, you also need to take care of yourself, and do self-care. And, like, for example, when you came out of architecture school, you needed that time to recover, to you know to process what had happened. So, um, sometimes when you live in a group or in a society, you have to say, okay, you know what, I need some time away, or I need some time for myself. And I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I think this phase that we're entering into is actually kind of a new phase, right? Because it is a phase of balancing the lessons learned through separation with the lessons learned through unity.
Right.
Right. So it is a part of that thing about, yeah, not only do I need to take care of myself, I also have to honor my specificity. Right. So that if I was built a certain way, if I was built if I came with certain gifts and talents, right, they are for me to use, and they're going to be different from yours. That doesn't make me better than you, right? That's where we go, okay, here's my talents. Hey, let's meet you with your talents. Let's meet and figure out what we can co-create. And I think that's the word for this phase, is co-creation.
Right.
That's what we're looking at. Collaboration, co-creation. How do we create a world together, right? Where everybody's taken care of.
Yes.
Where we are then free to pursue our gifts and talents. Where the meaning of life and existence is not about chasing a buck. It's not about survival, but it's about growth. It's about contribution. It's about learning. It's about, hey, what cool song could we write together?
Right.
Right? What cool thing could we put together in the world? So it is not about that. I don't think that this phase is really about, is meant to even be about fear and survival and lack and scarcity thinking.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And creating that kind of space, that kind of atmosphere, uh, you know, it's so important um, you know, at all levels of society. At the very top, in the government, at the government level, and also, also in our everyday lives, whether it's with our families or our friends. But, also, like in at the professional level, like, if you're, um, if you have a business, or, you have a like a cafe, for example, to create a space where people can feel comfortable and safe, and where they can express themselves.
Yeah, I think that's one of many possibilities. I think that is what this time is about. Now think about this. Think about that we are now living, like we're talking during the period of COVID, right?
Yeah.
Which has radically changed our world in just a few short months of whatever we thought was possible, whatever we dreamed could be, right? It's just been turned on its head, right? So it's like, oh, okay, all right, universe. So you just dealt us. So here is the things you need to work with. Now figure out how you're going to co-create with that, right? And it's not about, to me, it's not about wasting time. Maybe that's not a right way or a fair way to put it, but this is my opinion, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who have who have real difficulty with change, right? And they will go through what they go through, right? But for someone like me who's been through a lot of change, and has kind of come to some terms with it, it's like, oh, okay. So now we all have to stay home and work. Well, that's not going to be hard, is it? Because I've been
No, because
doing
that's
it
what you do anyway.
for the last, that's what I do anyway, right? And it was like, holy crap. So here's this thing where people are panicking. And it's like, but this is my life. My life has been this. Like, I've been built for this. Right? So I already have figured out like the work from home, the home family balance, the work balance, the you know, self-care part, all of these things, right? And it's like, whoa, that's funky, universe. What were you thinking? Right? And so for the first time in my life,
The
I
way that
fit.
you work, the way you work is the norm.
Yeah. It's like, what? Like, one of the things that came up also within this is the whole, shutting down schools and all kids going home and having to be homeschooled. Well, my kids are like 27 and 23. I part-time homeschooled them when it was not cool and fashionable or supported to do, right? So, that's another thing. It's like, oh, okay, this is something that I've already been through, journey I've been through. I have things to share about that, but how it can be done, and in fact, why it's goddamn important to do it. And then now we're in the scenario where it's like, oh yeah, I have to figure out how to homeschool. Like, yeah, you know, I could never have imagined this scenario, right? The universe is like pretty freaking amazing. Like, whoa, that is cool. How you created that, universe. Nice.
So there's some irony involved.
Not just irony. It's pure plain magic. Right? Like, we rush around and we're thinking, and I'm thinking, like, okay, we rush around and we think, oh my God, this is horrible, this is terrible. And it's not. Think about it, because really the way in which we experience our lives has everything to do with the perspective we bring. So if it's horror and it's terrible and oh my God, that's going to be your experience. Right. If you're looking at the computer screen, and I mean, I'm sharing what happened with me. Looking at the computer screen and there's this little ball and it's got this corona on it. Corona. Okay. And I did a painting like 20 years ago of sacred marriage. And the painting is of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And the crown that I painted around his head looks like this thing that's around the virus. Like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then there's that whole thing about that's in the Bible, which is the meek shall inherit the earth. Now, a virus is about the meekest freaking thing that you could ever think of being, right? I'm like, oh, okay. Is this actually, is this, is this something, I don't know, is this something, right? Because I'm interested in the narrative. I'm interested in the story, right? So if there was a story told in the past and it's like, oh, okay, here, something is coming to be, something is happening with this thing, I'm interested. I'm like, ooh, it's, real life movie, right? So this is the kind of thing where um, you can find the magic. It's what I call, it's actually referred to it as magic in the mundane. That is actually, it's not about having the big splashy, I'm a star, look at me, that thing. And it is not the exact opposite of it either, of like, oh my God, I'm nothing. It's not that. It's not that victim thing, and it's not that other thing. The magic is in the daily, is in that moment, those moments daily, right? Where amazing things happen. Like, I don't know, I'm out on my back deck and I'm having my coffee, and there's this gigantic oak tree across the alley. And there's I don't know, 1,000 birds in it, and they're all chirping. They're like just going. And then they start the flight maneuvers. They all take off at the same time, and they whirl around, and they're a big, giant black cloud flying. That's freaking magical. How do they know to take off together all at the same time? Which shape they're going to make? And, it's magic every day. And we live alongside it. It just has to do with how we see it.
I agree. There is magic in the mundane, and even things that are mundane, like just having your coffee. I mean, you can have so much enjoyment from the moments that surround that ritual of drinking your coffee and just thinking about something or reading a book or even staring out of your window. Like there's so much there. You just have to observe it and be attuned to it.
I think you're absolutely right, because life is just a series of moments.
Yeah.
There is no past, there is no future, there is only here and now,
Yeah.
right? When we think about the past, it's, basically we're not there, right? We're just here, right? It's a memory, it's a story. When we think about the future, it's also a story, something that we're creating about what we'd hope. But life is truly just a series of moments strung together, right? So it's just that thing. It's like, okay, what kind of moment? What would you like this moment to be? And that's all you have to be concerned about, is this moment.
Right. Right. And a lot of mindfulness practices, whether it's yoga or Reiki or just meditating. All of these practices are trying to get people to live in the moment, in and center their space around the moment. And some people do a very good job of living in the moment. Whether it's a child who's playing out in the field, or whether it's a monk meditating in a cave. They're very attuned to the moment. And then there's people that live in the past and people that live in the future, and you look at the quality of life that they have, and it's much less than the person that's living in the moment you know
Well, I think children are actually wired to be in the moment,
yeah.
right? Because they don't have the narrative. They don't have the narrative that's about past and future yet,
Right.
right? So they come, and that's actually what ideally we need to reclaim that way of being, because it is our inheritance. We came wired like that.
Right.
We didn't come out of the womb anxious about where our next meal was going to be coming from, or oh my God, like, no, we didn't come out like that, right? These are things that we've learned.
Yes.
Actually, here's a couple of a tool that helps me stay out of past and future thinking. So basically, with past thinking, there is, when you start to feel down and depressed, you're in past thinking, because with that's about regret. When you're in anxiety, you're in future thinking, right? Because you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? So if you notice that you're in either one of those, then you kind of have to bring your attention back to the present moment and focus on something that's right in front of you. That is where art making is a wonderful thing, right? Because when you're doing it, even if you go off on a conceptual thought process, or, you know, whatever, a thought process about whatever you're making, you actually have to, by default, come back to the present moment, because that is actually where your hands are moving, where you are actually creating this thing, right? And then, you know, in its own right, it's meditative, right? Like I actually, as a practice, I don't have a separate, I sit down and meditate practice, right?
It's a
This
life.
is it.
It's in it's
So
yeah.
my,
It's integrated. It's part
yeah,
of the
totally.
it's
It
part
is
of the
there was a, do you know this, do you know Ram Dass?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Ram Dass was, you know, he with Timothy Leary did experiments in LSD back in the 50s at Harvard, and then eventually he ended up going to India and finding his guru. And then he, you know, in the 70s and 80s, he did a series of tours. And in one of the lectures he gave, he tells a story about, you know, usually like the hall would be filled with these sort of, you know, radical hippie types, long hairs, you know, and but in the front row is this little old lady with these very sensible shoes and a sensible hat, and she just looked completely out of place. And he's intrigued, like, how did you get here? What brought you to my lecture? And so, you know, he keeps going, and he's trying to actually shock her a little bit, trying to get some sort of reaction out of her. And, you know, all through the lecture, she's nodding, she's nodding, she's nodding. And at the end of it all, he made it a point to go and talk to her. And he said, what is it that you do that is, you know, in alignment, or what is similar to what I've been talking about? Because he's talking about meditation and being in the now and all of that thing.
Right.
What is it that you do that allows you to know the all that is? And she leans forward conspiratorially and she says, I crochet. And I love that story. It's like one of my favorite stories, because it doesn't matter these assumptions, you know, of what people look like, and you assume that they, you know, whatever their spiritual, you know, progress or path is or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what people look like or any of those things. Right? What matters is the practice. Right? And yeah, and I can totally relate to this thing, because I'm actually a Netflixer. So it just means I watch Netflix and I knit. And it's amazing, because I can really, I actually don't, I half pay attention to whatever it is that's on the screen, but I'm really in my knitting. I'm really in the pattern that's being developed. And it's like, wow, that, yeah, I can get lost in it.
Well, and it doesn't matter what form or what shape the practice takes, as long as there is a practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for some people, it's music composition. For my partner who lives with MS, who is unable to use his hands to write or type anymore, he's a poet. Can you imagine where he's at, or how it is for him? His poems are in the moment, right? They are, you know, he has no way of recording them unless there's somebody to speak them to, right? Because even one of the nasty things about MS is, like, even if you dictate, it doesn't necessarily always understand your diction. And with MS, your speech gets slurred. So, you know, but yeah, for him, it's that being in the moment every day, right? Because his body has trapped him in the moment, which is like a really amazing thing. He can't go to the past, really. And, you know, and when he does, he experiences depression. He can think about the future, but he gets anxious. So he actually spends a good deal of his day in the moment. And who could have predicted that this is a gift from a disease?
Well, it is finding the silver lining in a dark cloud, but really, I mean, it's I mean, like you said, it's all about your perspective. If he wanted to be depressed about the fact that he had MS, it would be very easy to do that. But it's I mean, it's that's not productive. It's more productive to live in the moment, and like you said, to to embrace the possibility of living in the now. And I think when you are faced with disabilities or disease or any of the challenges that life throws you, um, really the what what makes up your character is how you react, how you respond, because you can't really choose the cards that you're dealt. You can only choose what you do with them.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? I think there is a, I think we need to actually also bust this myth of productivity,
Mm.
right? It's not productive, right?
Yeah, who
That's
the hell
some,
came up with that?
that's
Like that's
part of
that's a
some
that's an
capital.
industrial. Yeah, that's part of the capitalist and industrial revolution, like where everybody needed to be productive. I mean, before that, who cared what you did with your time? It was your time, But now we need workers. We need people that are just. And George Carlin actually talks about this. He says they need people that are just smart enough to write stuff down and make the copies off the copy machine and fax whatever they need to fax, and just dumb enough to accept their shitty paychecks and buy into this whole myth of productivity. You know and and it's really sad because, like, people no longer own their time. And I think the thing that's actually the most luxurious is time. If you own your time, that's the ultimate luxury. you know because people that have to work all the time and cannot enjoy their time, that seems to me like to be a horrible existence. I could never do it. I could never do that.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, this whole notion of productivity is also something that is, I think, in the process of being broken down, because we are going through a serious shift. I don't know how long it's going to take, next 7 years, 10 years, I don't know. Right. But because we cannot continue to live according to infinite consumption capitalism that as an economic model is going to collapse. It is collapsing right now.
Yes.
Right. So we are going to have to look at what we've been taught is, what's the dream?
Right. the
What's our life going to
the,
be?
the, the American
Um,
the American dream. It's one of those.
well,
It's
yes,
like you said, like
I would
it's
call
one
it
of
the,
those marketing campaigns, that's been fed to everyone, and everyone's bought into that illusion, and suddenly it becomes a reality. You know.
well, I would call it the capitalist dream, not the American dream,
Okay.
because Canadians buy into the same dream. Okay.
Right.
So it
Okay.
is the capitalist dream,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So, and you can see it all over the world. India's bought into it, and countries in Africa, like the whole world has bought into the capitalist dream, which is why it's not sustainable because, we live in a finite world. We cannot infinitely consume, right? Like a one person doesn't need that much shit, right? Just, so now we have to go back and look at, okay, well, sustainable living, what does that look like? And then when we look at Aboriginal ways of being, right, that brings in that whole idea of time and what happens with time, what happens with your day, what happens moment to moment. So you have to spend some amount of time on making sure that all of your physical needs are met. It's kind of like living Maslow's hierarchy,
Mm.
right? So some period of time is spent making sure your physical needs are met, but it's not just your physical needs. It is the physical needs of your tribe. It's the group, right? It's not just you fending for yourself with nobody around you. No, no, no. You're out picking berries, but everybody else is going to eat them too, right? And then when everybody works collaboratively, collectively to get this together, whatever it is,
Then
then
the
it's like,
workload,
oh, okay,
it makes
yeah,
it work.
shared workload.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what's next? Well, we're doing some carving, we're singing, we're, some of this stuff is things that we need to make that are useful, and some of these things are not. They're just simply because I want to make one.
They're aesthetic, they're pleasure.
Right? But yeah, so it's a collective experience, and it's a, you know, uh, it's everything that's delicious about art. Like it's found object art, because I'm going to go look for like the right piece of wood to carve, right? Or it's it's communal in that there's group activity with it. It's narrative based. Very often, this is how information gets transmitted.
Right.
Right. Right.
And
So if you,
these are the histories, these are the histories that are unfortunately not taken as seriously as, for example, things that are written down. But actually, a lot of the world's history is in its artwork, in the oral traditions, in the less tangible things.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to say
Like
that that's going to be a very old.
like in that like your grandmother who passed down the Ayurvedic, or the herbal knowledge to you. Like that's a
Yeah,
that's a I mean, that's an example of a tradition that's been passed down orally, generation to generation, and it's no less valid
yeah.
than anything that was written down.
No, you're right. It's no less valid. But it's an interesting thing, right? Because right now we're in this transitional point, right? So for me, like a lot of times I can do the transition before other people do them. But this was definitely having to get my head out of, oh, well, I need to have a piece of paper that says I have this knowledge, and then now I can go and do it, right? That whole, professional inculcation training. You're nothing without the piece of paper. Your knowledge is meaningless without the piece of paper that says that it's meaningful,
Right. Well,
right?
in fact, I've been talking to a lot of friends of mine who are artists and sort of in the field of music and public intellectuals, these kinds of people, and 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 we were actually arguing that the idea of university has become passé. That really the new way that people are validated is through their peers. Like if your peers think that your work is interesting and worthwhile, and and they champion your work, that's actually the new, well, not new, but that's the more appropriate or more effective method of really determining whether you're relevant in the cultural space.
And I think that's going to be short-lived, right? Because, you know, who cares what a bunch of people think about whether or not you're relevant?
Right, because
What's
it really matters
important
what
is whether you think
you
you.
believe. That's right. That's right. You're
Yeah,
absolutely right. And so at the end of the day, it's really about you. It's about you. It's about your, you know, your
yeah,
narrative and what you have to say. So, um, well,
yeah. I mean, I would poke holes in that one, only because it sounds a little bit too much like Facebook and a
right,
little bit too peer pressury.
right,
And to me, those are tools of the patriarchy. This is how we get kept in line,
mm,
right? Oh, you what your friends think matters because they're going to make or break you. Well, how different is that from going to the golf club to network, right? So I would say no, that can't be where this ends.
right,
Right? Because we've already spent a whole lot of time in that kind of networking,
yes, yes,
right? So, just because it's fancier and it looks, just because it's fancier and it's, in technology, it doesn't involve a golf caddy, it doesn't mean that it's new.
Yeah.
right?
And
Because when I look, one of the things I really look at, I know I have to, like, I have to post shit on social media and blah, blah, blah. But I actually do not enjoy doing it at all. I don't enjoy social media. And why? Because it brings up the worst nightmarish events of my childhood and peer group and peer pressure bullshit. Right? The caring how many likes, the caring what people think. How is this any evolution? This is not an evolution, right? And I'm just thinking, yeah, okay, there'll be something else. But right now this is what we have to do.
yeah,
Or this is what we're doing. Okay,
right.
fine.
This is the yeah, this is the modus operandi. But we have to change it. We have to. It has to. Yeah, we don't have to accept the world for the way it is. We have to sort of say, okay, what do we want it to be, and then work towards building that. And as
No,
human beings, that's one of the magical things about being a human being. You can actually do that. You can
I'm
change it.
going to tell you this about absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to tell you one of the things about social media and my business. That's not how I make my sales, dude. It doesn't happen because I post something lovely on Facebook. It happens because of the personal relationships that I build with people.
Yeah.
Right? That's how it is. If people send me a question and I take the time to answer and we have a back and forth, that's how a sale gets made. It doesn't get made because I posted some fancy looking picture that fits somebody else's ideal of what life should be, as opposed to just dealing with life. Right? So when people ask me a question, I'm just dealing with life. That's actually where we're going. That's how we're going to co-create. That's how
Right.
we communicate.
That's that's and
That's
that's
how we
that interpersonal connection, these relationships that we build, that's really uh that's the way that marketing and sales is well, because the conventional idea, oh, you post some beautiful picture with some fancy caption, and that will generate sales. Well, it might generate likes, it might generate exposure, but it doesn't necessarily account to sales. Because if you have somebody reach out to you, and they ask you a question, and you don't answer them, then you've just lost a potential customer. Or if
I
somebody
think
sends you a question, and you're not polite with them, or you don't take the time to really answer the question, and to you know spend a moment with them, then people don't feel like there's any resonance, there's no connection there, so why should they buy the product?
yeah. Look, when my grandmother used to do this back in her day in Nairobi, in her neighborhood, right? People would show up at her door with a complaint. Oh, Fatma, Fatma by my pet dukeje, right? My stomach is hurting, or I had a headache. She'd make them a cup of tea, they'd sit down and they'd chat. And while they're chatting, she's mixing up whatever their remedy is. Right. So, they're getting a little, talk therapy. They're going to get their Ayurvedic mix. And she anyway, there was like an interaction with the healer, right? So then they'd have their thing, they'd go and and feel better and whatnot. So I looked at that and I'm like, okay, what does that look like for the 21st century? Right? Because I'm not going to get people who actually physically arrive at my door, and I'm not going to be able to make them a cup of tea and do talk therapy. But what does it look like for the 21st century, right? And the interaction, the answering of questions, through email or messenger, whatever it happens to be, that is kind of where it's at. The other thing that I will do is that when people communicate with me and they are looking for a specific type of blend and they're not sure, and this and that and the other thing, I send samples all the time. People like who are in other aspects of my industry are like, what that must be really expensive. What blah, 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 blah. I'm like, dude, I wouldn't want to try it. Like, I wouldn't want to buy it if I couldn't try it to see if it works first. So if I wouldn't do it for me, why would I expect somebody else to shell out? Right? I would want a sample. So that's what I'm going to offer, is samples. Right? So that you don't have to be, and if I can't offer a sample in a particular thing, I'm going to give you, I'll give you like a discount for trying it. Right? There's different ways, is my point. But that was what I was looking at, was like, okay, how do I translate this very personalized service to the 21st century? right? And you know, then this whole thing too about knowledge and university and I had a conversation with a number of women who are recent arrivals in Canada. And, you know, part of that picture is always like, oh, I have to establish home and work, right? Now, most of these women who I was speaking to, just about all of them had post-secondary education, right? But of course, they can't get work in the area that they've been trained for because of the, you know, what is it called? Exclusivity, you know, that thing of like keeping people out, right? And making it difficult. Here's the different hoops and jumps, the hoops you have to jump through before you can practice as, you know, a mechanical engineer that you've been trained for in another country, right? So I get on this call with all these women and they're working with the YWCA. So now the YWCA has its own, I guess it has its own way of thinking. I don't know what it was. Anyway, here's this group. And I know most of them have this post-secondary education, and they want to know how to start a childcare business. All of these women, we're talking like, you know, whatever, 10 women, different educations, different interests. Why are they all asking, hey, how do I start a childcare, right? The only reason that would be is somebody has told them, well, you know, you can't be an engineer, be a journalist, be a, you know, whatever, a teacher, or whatever it is they were trained to do. But you know what you can do in Canada? You can be, you can open a daycare, right?
That's so fucked.
And like, you know, I
That's
look at that
so
and
up.
It's totally fucked up, right? Because what it means is whether you came through the nanny program or whatever other program, your entire available role as a woman of color in Canada, as a recent newcomer, is you're going to take care of our children. You're going to be a nanny by default, regardless of which program you came through.
That's
fucked up, right?
Yeah, okay. It's just so bad. I mean, I don't even know. Like,
yeah,
that.
So we're having the conversation, and I'm listening, and I'm like, and I'm telling them the story about me starting my business without having the piece of paper, right? It's based on knowledge that I have that's been passed down by, you know, through generations, and it just has to do with what you value and how you value it, and then the rest is all navigating hoops, right? So they keep, you know, they're still not sure, right? And then I finally say, there's this one woman, she's a mechanical engineer, she's an engineer, and come on, get real. They're like, come on, you know, I know you didn't go to university to become an engineer so you could look after somebody else's children. I know, you know, you've got an idea up your sleeve. I just know you do. You know, when, you know, what is it? What's your idea? She's like, I've been working on solar panels. I'm like, that's it. Forget about the daycare thing. That's somebody else's idea of what you should be, right? You just have to figure out how to make that fly here, right? That's about design. That's about, you know, innovation and other ways of thinking, which if you've been a refugee and you've had to cross multiple lands to get here, you know a thing or two about creative survival. Absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
You have to. I mean, these are skills that you would, these are the kinds of transferable skills that people are always talking about. Oh, you know, you have to know how to solve problems. And I'm like, well, if you're a refugee, your whole life has been about solving problems, you know? So
yeah,
this is, you know, this is not something that you have to learn. This is something, you know, this is part of your life. It's part of the living, the living experience that you have.
Exactly. But, you know, again, so, oh, well, you know, you don't know how to do this, you don't know how to do that when you come here, right? Because here are all these people who have, you know, post-secondary education. They've got degrees, sometimes multiple degrees, right? And then some immigration officer is saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's like, oh, well, this is like a really great way to basically cut someone off at the knees and destroy their self-esteem, destroy their sense of self. Like the trauma that they've been through in their home country isn't enough. You've got to come and do this, right? So I think that there's a lot out there, right? Like I could now. This ties back to that other conversation about we're all built to do different things and we can help in different ways.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not interested in petitioning the government and writing them letters. Right. I've been around people who've been doing that since like, the 80s. Right. It's like, so that's somebody else's job. Right. But if I can sit down with these women and have a conversation and go, hey, look, I'm a child of immigrants, right? This is what they had to go through. Isn't it interesting that their experience, one generation off, is the same as your experience? That tells you not that there's anything wrong with you, that there's something wrong with the immigration system.
Yes.
Right. So now, how do you make your life? How do you make your work? Well, they keep telling you, you need to have Canadian experience and you need to go and work with people here and and now we are in the middle of freaking COVID, right? So in the 21st century, where we have online stores, does it matter that you have Canadian experience?
No.
Maybe your client base is in your home country, or it's other people who speak the same language you do, and they live in California or wherever else they live.
Right. So the barrier to entry is now not, well, not that it doesn't exist or it's completely eliminated, but it's much it's much easier now with the internet for you to start up a shop and sell your product and or even your service. Like you don't necessarily even have to sell a product. You can sell ideas now. We live in the quote
Yeah,
unquote knowledge economy. So I mean,
yeah,
you know, as long as you have
exactly.
as long as you have an idea, you can create a space for it online and
E- exactly. Right. So then it becomes like, okay, well, do I hold myself back because the government hasn't created blah 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 blah, blah, or do I just go ahead and do it? Right. And I'm going to tell you, it takes a lot. Like when you've been through things that are very traumatic, where you have to rebuild your life. Yeah, it takes you a while to get there, to get to the place of, what, I'm just doing it.
yeah, and to hell with the
Right?
people that say I can't do it. I'm gonna do what I want anyway, and I'm gonna do it really well, and and
Yeah,
you know and let the naysayers
yeah,
be naysayers, because that's like you said, everybody has a role. So even the people that are saying,
yeah,
oh, you can't do this, they're showing you that, okay, you know what, there is a way, you just haven't seen it, you just don't understand.
yeah, yeah. So if you recognize it, that, yeah, those things are, I'm going to push against that, see what else how I can develop this thing, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
But, again, then you still, yeah, I think we're living in really fascinating times.
Mm.
Really, like, you know, things are just been turned on their head like this after all of these years, decades, whatever. People saying, oh, government saying, oh, we can't do a universal basic income. Well, hello, you just did it overnight. So, hey, I guess you can, right? And oh, no, we can't have a situation where people work from home. And yeah, well, we've been doing it since March. So guess what? I think you can.
Yeah. and
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 and what's
and
fascinating too,
COVID's proved this stuff. Like,
absolutely,
it's proof of concept, because
absolutely,
before people might have said, oh, oh, you're just an idealist. Well, now
yeah,
look at it. Now look at it. Now who's the idealist? There's no. We were realists from the start.
exactly,
You just didn't recognize that these realities were real. And
yeah.
it took something like COVID to show you that this is actually, this is the way it is for some people.
And see, one of the things that's really fascinating to me is what are the corporations going to do, right? Because of course, the corporations are not going to adjust their DNA just yet. So they're going to want to keep on making their profits, right? So it's interesting to me that I don't see, like, so for example, we know there's people that we know who work for large corporations. They've mostly been working from home. There's maybe been one time since March where it would have benefited them all to be in the same room to share information. Otherwise, Zoom calling is just fine, right? Um, and that corporation that they're working for, I don't see them, like, they're making noises about, oh, well, I guess we have to go back to normal. But I don't see why they would want to. The overhead is huge,
Yeah.
right?
Ironically, it would benefit them if everybody worked from home, because
Absolutely, you
they
would. You
wouldn't
want to
they
make
wouldn't have
profits? Well, let
office
everybody
space,
work.
they
Yeah,
wouldn't have to pay for coffee, they wouldn't have to pay for anything that they would normally have to pay for.
exactly. Yeah. So if I was a corporation that had that ideology and mentality, and all of my work is getting done, and it's getting done in actually less time than it would if they were in the office, I'd be like, hey,
This is great.
y'all
Yeah,
work
this
at
is
home.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, keep on doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And then, maybe I need to, which means I can scale down. I don't have to have all of this space, this office space, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Hey, and
And
then
and
that could
and
have
and
other.
you can, like, if you need space, like if you actually need to physically get people together, you can just find a space to rent for a day rather than
Yeah,
having permanent facilities.
exactly. Right. And then, you look at things like, oh, okay, so now if we don't need all of these industrial malls
Hmm.
everywhere, and I'm
Yeah.
talking Canada,
Yeah.
huh? That those buildings that are kind of built probably on agricultural land, right? It's like, oh, we don't need those anymore. We could go back to growing food. Oh, oh, you mean actually we may have enough land to feed the minuscule population that is Canada compared to other countries in the world? Yeah, actually, we might,
Yeah.
right? So values are
Values change.
automatically shifting.
Right, because why do we need all this commercial space? At the end of the day, like, it's all pretty useless, you know?
Yep,
Especially
it
like
is.
malls, like, even the
I
idea,
know.
the malls are like the worst. I hate malls. This is funny. I actually prefer airports to malls, which is saying something.
I like that. I think malls do serve a function in certain cities,
Yeah.
like winter cities for sure,
Yeah, and it's like
right?
a
Because
place. It's a place to gather. It's
yeah,
like it's a social space in a
yeah.
you know.
But let's look at that. It's a social space where some, you know, gets paid for by people buying shit, right?
Yeah.
So we actually need social spaces in winter cities.
Right. So
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 what do
why
these
not
malls
why not why
become?
not have why not have like a bookstore cafe, or like a, or I don't know, like a, I don't know, like a nice, like, hangout space. Why not just, but then of course it has to sustain itself. So it would probably have to have some sort of commercial, venture to support itself.
Hey, we don't even know what this is yet, right? Because we don't know what's happening with you know good old COVID.
Yeah.
Um, we don't know. It's morphing. It's doing something else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
it's showing
yeah,
us it's showing us the things that have been right under our noses that we just haven't been willing to look at. It's putting them in
yeah,
our face, like it's saying,
yeah,
"Hey, look at this."
yeah. It's making us look at what is most important to us in our lives,
Yes.
right? What is the most important thing,
What
right?
matters?
And
What matters?
yeah, what matters, right? And for most of us, it is coming down to you know having a roof over my head and food.
Yeah.
So I'm talking Maslow here, right? It's coming down to that. It's coming down to my friends, my family, my friends, and my work, that which gives me meaning,
Ab-
right? And when I say work, I don't mean the jobs that we have to have. I mean my purpose. What
Yes.
is my purpose?
Yes.
What gives me meaning and joy?
Yeah.
That's what it's coming down to.
Yeah. Well, and I like to think of work as practice. Like, what's your practice?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
You know,
Right, and I think that there's this.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, no.
I I was gonna ask you about the story that you told me where the Aga Khan Museum um, was hiring no brown people, and you I think you said to somebody, or you wrote a letter to somebody.
Sorry. Sorry.
No worries. You wrote a letter or something to somebody, and as a result, or you're not sure if it's a direct result, but then Amir Ali Bai was hired at the museum. Somebody from our community, like.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a direct result, right? But yeah, I wrote a letter saying, hey, we have professionals, right? That we've been, in training for a long time.
Well, and
We can do these jobs, and
well,
that you don't have to hire outside the community.
right. Well, I think that's really interesting because um, I yeah, it's funny, like if you're in a smiley, and you're really good at what you do. If you're not acknowledged outside the community, then suddenly it's like what you're practicing is not looked at as favorably. Like if you're a well established lawyer outside the Ismaili community, then suddenly you get props and you get kudos within the Ismaili community. But I don't know why that is, but it's like there's
Oh,
just.
dude, seriously? Are you telling me you don't know why that is?
No, like I don't understand it. Why would your
It's
own people.
internalized colonialism. It's
Right,
internalized racism. It's as
right.
simple and as easy as that.
You're
It is
right.
not complicated.
You're right. No, you're right. It is. I. That's exactly what it is. But when you point this out to people, a lot of people will say, will argue that actually, no, this is not the residue of colonialism and internalized racism. We just uh, we want to live up to, or we want to comply with the standards of best practice established by our respective fields. And basically what they mean is, we want to be we, we need to get validated by white people. That's basically what they're saying, you know.
You know what? I really think um, there comes a time, because I have played in that arena for a really long time. Like of the, oh, notice me, I'm just as good as you. No, look at me. There comes a point where you kind of have to make a decision about whether you need that approval or not.
Right.
What is it that you do your work for? What's your purpose in doing it? And do you really need that outside approval, or that, community approval? I mean, because if I look back at my own history in this department, it's that whole thing about, oh, I just want to be accepted. I just want to be embraced and loved by my own community, right? That's an extension of, I want that from my family. It's the same kind of deal. And really what that comes down to, I'm a freak who makes art. And there is nothing in the community, especially when I was growing up, I was born in the 60s, that said, oh yeah, let us nurture our artists, man. That wasn't there.
Yeah.
It was all about like, okay, doctor, lawyer, accountant, what are you going to be?
Yeah.
Okay, because that piece of advice is all about, we need to survive. Right? So you have to shut down.
Art and culture were seen as luxuries, like something that
yeah.
But that's so ironic, because look at the golden age of the Ismaili history, which is the Fatimid period.
Okay, I don't know that we want to go down this road now, dude. Okay? I really don't know.
No, you know what? I want to know.
No, because what I'm going to tell you about that is a narrative that has been constructed. I have a lot of questions about that narrative.
Okay, let's go. Let's delve into it.
I don't want to delve into that. What I want to talk about first, before we go there, is that construction is about something outside ourselves, outside our experience, outside anything that we can even validate or verify, right? Saying, no, this is the ideal, right? And it's basically saying, this is the ideal, you are not the ideal. Okay. So whatever it is that you came wired with, which in my head is, dude, I was made this way by my creator. Okay. So if you don't like the creator's handiwork, not my issue. Right. I need to then decide how much of your approval do I need? How much do I need to belong to this tribe? Right. And I think that's what it comes down to. If you acknowledge your own being and your own self, I mean, this ties back into what we were talking about being in the moment, right? About, being the best you can be, right? If that is the value and that is the most important thing, whether or not your parents or other people or whoever say to you, man, you're wasting your life, you should be an accountant, is irrelevant. It's just irrelevant. Right. So I'm at this point.
Because I'm having this kind of struggle right now, like deciding on whether I want to go to university or not. And my parents are basically saying, you have to go to university, that you have no choice. Like, it's the only way to, to succeed. And, and I seriously question that. And I don't think that's the only way to do things. And they're not happy about the fact that I'm questioning the narrative. They're like, this is the only path that there is.
Because if you question the narrative, you're questioning them. They have accepted that this is the narrative. This is what we have to do to have a successful family life, right? So that, whatever, our son goes out and procreates and does whatever he does in the world, whatever that narrative is about, right? Because really, what is it about? It's about, you got to have a job because you're going to support a family and then you're going to make babies. That's what it's about, right? So, just 1 second here.
No worries.
Can I help you out here, Tom? Yay, you made it. All right. Okay, bye, dear.
Bye, thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, so that narrative is about that. It's a survival narrative, right? Entirely, right? Now, when you bring other pieces into it, it has a lot to do with, okay, well, how did I come wired? This is about self-acceptance, self-knowledge, right? Which is supposed to be a part of what we're here to do, right? That's the Sufi angle. Self-knowledge, self-exploration, right? So at some point, you just got to make a decision about your path, right? And I mean, I'm not saying that it's easy in your 20s. It wasn't easy for me, right? I mean, I took on an entire frickin' architecture faculty. I'm damn lucky I graduated, right? But, you basically end up picking your battles and going in that way.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, what were you built to do? Right? Because, your friends, your family, they come, they go. You have to live with you your whole life.
Yes.
Right? So, what is it that brings you joy? What is it that you were made to do that is your contribution?
Agreed.
Right? And maybe your contribution is not even necessarily to other people directly. It's to simply make beautiful music that maybe some point somebody will come and listen to, and it will change them somehow. I know this, and this is from my own experience, okay? That when you make a decision from love for yourself, honoring what the creator made you to be, and honoring your own gifts and talents, when you make a decision from there versus, oh my God, some fear thing, some fear narrative, right? Whatever you need in the survival angle of things, shows up in the weirdest ways sometimes. Totally unexpected. Did any of us artists think we were going to get a universal income benefit this year? Ever? But we did, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't plan for that shit. Right? You know, the universe they're much better at creating than we ever can be. Right? I think you need to decide how much fight you want to put into it. You want to fight or you want to create?
Well, I know. I don't want to fight. I want to create. I want to.
That's it. And then one of the things that helped me, okay, is I had to come to a point of like, okay, this is like my group, my tribe, and they're not necessarily as supportive as I would like, or whatever in that narrative, right? I had to make a decision about, do I even like my tribe? If I wasn't born into my tribe, would I hang out with these people? If, like you ask yourself a set of questions that you wouldn't normally ask yourself because shame and guilt makes you not ask them.
Right.
Okay. That's how we're kept in line. You have unquestionable loyalty. That's what you have to have. And it's like, yeah, really? Okay. So does that cut two ways? That unquestioning loyalty, right? Will you support me? Will you will you help me? Or will other people be privileged over me? How is this going to work? Is it equal or not? Is it true or not? Are you just telling me this to fuck with me or not?
Yeah, these are the kinds of critical questions that scare the shit out of most Ismaili parents. Because if their kids started asking these questions, then they would poke holes in so many of the narratives that have been fed to them.
Yes, and here's the thing, is that we are entering a phase. Hello, Ismaili parents. We are entering a phase where all of that is going to break down, because every single organized religion that has its basis in fear and shame and obeyance is all up for question in this world narrative that's changing. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking Ismaili, we're talking Catholic Church, we're talking about anything that is organized that way, that consolidates power based on people's beliefs or lack of beliefs in themselves and their own connection to all that is, to the God source, right? Any religion that says, oh, don't worry, got you covered, right? We've got a direct line to God. We'll get you to heaven, no problem. Any one of those religions is up for discussion, is up for reevaluation, right? Because it's promising something that you actually have. You're born with it, that connection.
Right. Well, they have no control.
You're born with that. Nobody
exactly.
Yeah.
And
So if I, and here's the thing, is that if I believe that somebody else is going to make that negotiation for me, I'm basically, upshot, bottom line, I am giving my power away to that person or institution.
Right.
Right. So
that's just shooting yourself in the foot.
I believe that to be true. But that being said, there are some people who need that kind of hand-holding guidance, that kind of like the belief that somebody else is going to take care of it, that somebody else will save them.
Right.
There are people who need that.
I know.
But not everybody does.
And that kind of, I mean, to me, that's just so sad. Like when people are like, oh, I'll pray and Mola Bapa will look after me. I'm like, that's a nice idea. I wish it were true, but it's not.
No, but you look, okay, hang in there, because while there's a whole bunch of things in here that I will not subscribe to or cannot subscribe to and will not believe in, I'm not going to trash somebody else's. Okay, so yeah, what I need to do is not trash it per se. And I mean, I may have sounded like I just trashed it, but what I'm saying is that these things are really up for rediscovery and discussion, right? I don't think that it's, because if somebody is saying to me that this is their belief, I need to believe that I can pray to X, Y, or Z, and they are going to save me, and there's going to be, that is not up to me to decide where their soul is at.
Right.
If that is the stage their soul is at, so be it.
Right.
The only requirement I have in that is, if that is your belief, you know, peace go with you. Do not cause me any harm, right? Meaning, don't project your belief on me as though it's right for me, because I have my own.
Right.
Right? I'm respecting yours. Now you respect mine.
Right. And unfortunately, most people, with most situations, it doesn't go like that. People want to project their beliefs on other people. People want to say, oh, what I think is right and what you think is, is not correct, or there's this kind of, it's like the whole narrative of otherness. It's the idea that my narrative or my belief system is more valid or better than yours, whether or not, whether they even know what your belief system is or not. Most people will never ask the question, oh, what do you believe, or what do you think? They'll just tell you what they think, and that's the end of it. It's very one-sided.
It's not really a narrative. What it is actually is a narrative of power.
Yeah.
And within these systems where we give our power away to organizations, there's a part of us that knows this is not right. Right? And I think that there is a need that people have to validate a choice that they made, even if it wasn't the best choice. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yes.
So yeah, I can see that. Like, I know that's certainly something that has happened. I've experienced where it's not so much about, so part of it is the othering, in that it's not really about the othering. It's about judging, which in itself is about othering, but it's about judging and going, I'm better than you because I did this thing, right? I'm going somewhere you're not going, right? So it's about separation. That's the word I'm looking for. The whole narrative is about a continuation of separation. And unless you subscribe to this thing,
you're
right?
not part of the saved people.
Yeah, you're not part of the tribe, however you want to describe that.
Yeah.
But then, we kind of do the thing where we look, okay, for me, it's like, okay, I'm pulling the camera back. How big a tribe we talking here, right? If I believe that, source made me, that's my tribe. You telling me I'm not part of that tribe? No, I'm a part of that tribe. Guess what? You're a part of that tribe too. That's the tribe. Right? It's like, but if you need this other one and it makes you feel safer and it makes you feel better, that's totally fine. Look, I have an aging parent. She needs that tribe. There is no way that I would be like, because we've had our discussions over the decades, right? But, she needs that. To her, it's important that she feels, okay, this is the thing about perspective and how you hear things and how you interpret them. She always telling me that she's praying for me and my success, and that it's part of the narrative. It's the same languaging for decades, right?
Right.
What I have come to do is realize that what she's really saying, it's a mother's wish for her child's success. I would have the same for my own children, right? She uses this language to say it. I would use other language. Right.
But
so
the intention or the right.
Right. So, my poor mom, I mean, it's tough for her in some ways because, the guilt shame stuff just, it did not work as good as it used to. Right. So it happens when you get older, I guess. And it's hard because this is how they've been taught. And this is the politics, back to that word, of relationship management. This is how you do it. Right? We shame, we guilt, we humiliate so that you will behave the way we want you to behave. Right? But even that, like that also is not, it has no teeth after a certain point, because it only works if you want somebody's approval, if you want somebody to like you, Facebook like or whatever like. If you want you know, if somebody to tell you you're okay because you're having difficulty telling yourself you're okay, that's when it works. If you don't need any of those things, it doesn't work. You're free. You're free of all of it. Right? And sometimes it takes quite a while to get there.
Yeah, it does.
Which is also something that, you know, I don't think, you know, it's not worth being hard on ourselves about that. Right? Because we, you know, it took me decades to becoming, you know, until I got to the point of like, yeah, this is not actually nourishing my spiritual connections. Right? So I need to stop. But that's my decision, my individual choice, not everybody's. Right? It comes down to, you know, the decision you need to make for your own life, and, you know, what you're willing to live with. And that changes as you grow, as you age.
I'm so happy we talked about this. Like this is so important, you know, to put out into the open and to have these kinds of frank conversations about, you know, about these subjects, which are unfortunately not often talked about. You know, the systems of validation, systems of approval, systems of power, systems of oppression. You know, the politics of relation management. Like this is, like you said, this is the stuff that, because everybody wants freedom at the end of the day. Nobody wants to be trapped by these things. But unless we talk about them, unless we figure out what these are, we can't dismantle them.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think that whenever you have a red flag that goes off, when you start to get really freaking angry about something, right? That's the area where you have to, you know, sit down quietly and sit with it. What am I angry about? Why is this triggering me? Right? What is it that's, you know, what's going on here? Right? I mean, you know, when you have, say, for example, a parent who says, no, you should go and become a lawyer, right? And really your skill is art. There's a part of you, okay, I'm speaking from my own experience, part of you that gets really angry, right? You just want to rail against it. At the same time, you want that approval. That's why you're railing so hard. Right. That's the part. That's the hardest part. To actually sit with that and go, you know what, I actually want you to just unconditionally love me and approve of me and say, doesn't matter what you do, darling, we will always love you.
Yes,
that's really what we want.
That's what we want. And you know what? It was so hard for me to realize that about myself, to say, you know what, this is actually what I want. I want your approval. I want your love. I want your unconditional love. And when you don't get it, then it's like, this is the crux. This is what it is. Like this is the pain point. You know, this is
Yes. And then it's up to you to decide how long you're sitting in that pain point. Right? Because you can go, okay, you are having difficulty, my beloved parent, loving me unconditionally. But you know what? I got source who made me, who knows all about that stuff. So I do have, if you want to, again, it's the how you look at it, right? And be like, okay, I actually have that if I choose to tap into it. And here's the other thing, is that which is life force, source, divinity, whatever, lives inside me, which means I can give myself that. I can approve of me unconditionally. I can love me unconditionally. I can parent myself in a way that I was not parented. Right? I can do that for me because it's a part of my self-care and my evolution.
Yes.
Right? So it is possible then to kind of go, okay, I don't have to actually sit in that pain point for too much longer. You know what? I just love the way I was made. Thank you. You know, whoever did that. And I'm just kind of interested. I'm curious and interested in exploring these different things I got given, right? Like, you know, stuff that these songs that just automatically play in my head, like, you know, whatever it is that ignites your passion, basically, right? And I have no judgment about that either. in that I will talk about things that are creative or art based, right? Just because that's what I know, or that's where my wellspring is. But you know, there are people who are amazing healers, amazing, and it's their, you know, their energy comes right through them, and that is their passion, that is their thing, right? It's just a matter of finding what it is that's your thing, and then approving of yourself doing it unconditionally.
Yes.
Being it unconditionally.
Yes.
Right? And everybody else, because source is how source works. Everyone else will fall in line. Everyone else falls in line once you have made that decision for your life.
Yeah.
That's what free will is about, dude.
Yes.
Right? Free will is not about, oh, I have to do what everybody else says and I have to diminish my light. That's not the purpose of free will.
No, it's
right.
It's the opposite. It's really
Yeah. So yeah, the choices are meant to be such that you shine your absolute brightest. Right. And you know, yeah, that may be just like, it may take you an entire lifetime to get there. You may not even get there. It doesn't matter. It's not about getting there. It's the journey. That's actually what this is about. That's why we're here, to do the journey, not the end goal.
Yeah, well, it's about the pilgrimage. The
Yeah.
Like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And you know, if you're someone who believes in multiple lifetimes, then it means that you've gone on a bunch of different journeys.
Yes.
Right. And you know, you and here's the other part that I love. It means you designed this journey in some way before you came into this lifetime.
Right.
Which means you might have picked those parents who were going to say no, because they were going to be that thing that you had to push up against to go, no, I believe in myself this much.
This is yeah, I mean, these are some pretty well, this is spirituality, really, when you get into it. Like, these are the kinds of spiritual questions or the spiritual, you know, thought processes that I like to engage in. Like, you know, yeah, if we did create this journey, if we had we agreed to this, the rules of this, you know, of this game, or of this life, and you know, and so then, you know, if we chose this, and you know, we were the co-creators of this reality, then we're just as responsible for it than as anyone else.
Yeah, I think that's what the collective consciousness represents.
Yeah.
Right? It is us collectively creating this reality.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, right now, we have created a situation that has required change on a dime, right? Because we can't seem to get it by consensus. We've had to kind of, you know,
Be forced.
and this is one way of looking at it, right? That, you know, we've kind of created this thing, like, boy, it's part of a million prayers of like, okay, we need some help because we need a catalyst. Because we can't seem to like just sit down at a table and make and agree. You know, every time we sit at a table, we want to kill each other or whatever's going on, right?
So we kind of forced our own hands.
You know, I mean, there's so many ways to look at this, but you know, if we're talking about the whole the spiritual angle of this, okay, we live in a free will zone, right? Now that's a pretty, I think the rules on that are taken very seriously in the spiritual realms, right? Of choice. And I think we're in the middle of negotiating a shift in how this is done. I mean, you can see that shift on so many levels, right? We've talked about it in terms of like the movement from experiences of separation. Now, just imagine that, oh, okay, part of the game that we've designed, because I think this is very, like, this entire experience to me is very matrix, right? We're all in some kind of amazing holograph or holographic game. Right? That's what it feels like. We're in a video game. That's what this feels like. And my avatar happens to look like this. And she can do a bunch of things. And I can make choices based on what's happening in the game around me, or I can think about it no, it's not just thinking, it's thinking and feeling. That's something we miss. That, no, there's something else, there's more. Just, and I don't necessarily, whether you take the red pill or the blue pill or whatever that is, right? So I think we're in a period of time where this holographic game has been about experiencing separation, right? Now, the Buddhists have the Dhamma wheel, right?
Yeah.
In the Dhamma wheel, it's every single emotional experience that you could possibly have before you're done doing lifetimes. That's the idea of it, right? Okay, so I think it's a similar kind of thing where it's like, okay, well, for this age, we're playing the separation game. Who wants to come? And then it's like, okay, we're gonna experience separation from source, separation from each other, isolation, all of the bits and pieces that go with what it means to be separate, right? And then if you look at how things are happening right now, it seems like, we're at the end of an age. Mayan civilization is telling us this. The Vedas are telling us this, right? That we're in the age of Kal Yuga. We are in the end of an age, and then the cycle shifts, and we go into a golden age, right? This is like centuries, right? The Mahabharata is the last, is a record of the last war fought at the last age turnover, right? It's destructive, right? So we have an option. We don't necessarily, so it's interesting, right? Because it went from that into this whole age cycle of separation and everything that had to do with separation. And now we're shifting over again, and it's like, oh, okay, so this seems to me like now moving into an inclusion of unity consciousness. So it's an awareness of ourselves as individual, yet together. So it's not just unity consciousness, and it's not just separation consciousness. It's these two things coming together, which, we've already played multiple games on, meaning multiple lifetimes on. This is stuff I sit around. I think about this stuff like a lot, right? Of like, what does it mean? What's it for? What's it about? Why?
And
I think
these are the age-old questions. These are the questions that have been asked from the beginning of time ad nauseum.
Yeah, especially in this game, because we forget who we are, right? That's what the nature of this one is.
Yes.
Right. Okay, you go down the chute. You go down the chute. As soon as you enter that meat suit, you forget who you are. That's one of the rules of the game. You have no access to prior lifetimes or prior knowledge except through intuition.
And that's why intuition is so important.
Absolutely.
It's a guiding.
Why do you think whatever institutions that like power and control have been trying to destroy intuition for centuries? Why witch burnings? Why abuse and all kinds of manner of breaking people, so that we won't value intuition at all. We won't value the sacred feminine at all. We erased from every organized religion you can think of. Right? Because that's what she represents. She's our intuition. She's our connection to source. She's our connection from here. Right? So without intuition, we don't have easy access to who we are or what we may have experienced in the past.
And no matter how much you intellectualize or over intellectualize something, at the end of the day, if you can access it intuitively, it's the difference between living something and theorizing about something. And lived experience is always going to trump an idea or a theory or something that you've invented in your mind.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, there are so many, from your, even though Eckhart Tolle will write from a very intellectual kind of perspective, he is actually talking about living it, experiencing it, and making choices based on experience.
Yes, and a lot of people don't understand that philosophy uh, is is not just ideas and theories. Philosophy is really like your life. It's what you live. If it's just an idea, then it has no weight. It needs to be lived in order to really, in order to give it some sort of validity or some sort of grounding.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you look at like, okay, so there have been so many people, it's so many times in, in our human history, who've been willing to die for ideas, who've been willing to die for a particular kind of experience.
Like Mansur al-Halaj, for example,
Yeah.
who said "Anal Haq," which is "I am the truth," and everybody. I mean, that was possibly the worst thing he could have said.
Well, because he's saying, I'm God.
Yeah,
I am the truth.
yeah,
That means that divinity lives inside me.
yeah.
Well, if that's the case, that means I have direct access to source and need no intermediaries. That's why it's fucking scary. Right? So, if you were in the business of running a religion, well, you might it might put you out of business if people believe that.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And it's bad for business. That's right. And so they had to kill him. They had to get rid of him. You know, and that happens to a
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
hard to control. It's hard to control people who believe that they are free. Right? It's hard to,
Relationships.
yeah, but I don't know. I think we are heading into different times, right? Because if you look at it, this is a culmination of the experience of separation. Now have a look at the 20th century has been really, really interesting in terms of the form our philosophy has taken, the philosophers, what they look like, what they do. Who are philosophers in the 20th century, right? You think about it. Well,
Charlie
you've got your
Chaplin.
Gandhi. Huh?
Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah. Think about that, right? And you've got people that, yes, there's like the go-tos, right? You got your Gandhi, you got your Martin Luther King Jr. Interesting that everything Gandhi learned, he learned through his wife. Never acknowledged. But the sacred feminine was working pretty damn hard in that relationship, let me tell you. Right? And there's a biography of her life, and basically that she lived it. She taught him how to do passive resistance, because she did it. He would like come down with some order, like, oh, you're not going down to rah, 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 because you're my wife and I tell you what to do. He would do that thing, and she'd go, yeah, yeah, in one ear, out the other. When it's time to go, she goes. There was something about not allowing her to go to the temple with his mother. She's like, I gotta go because your mother asked me. I gotta go with her. I can't not go. He's like, I'm telling you. Right? So now she has to decide whether she's going to obey her mother-in-law or she's going to obey her husband. She went with her mother-in-law, right? And she just, completely ignored his things because they didn't make any sense for the family context or what needed to get done in the house. Right? So she taught him how to do it. And that these are things that we forget in our history. So back to the philosophers of the 20th century. They're musicians. They're songwriters. They're the Lizard King. They're, they are all of those people who wrote extensively about love. Why is every pop song about love?
Asshole.
Right? Why? No, and a lot of them didn't have any kind of extensive training in music. They learned it by doing it.
That's the best way to learn. That's the best way to learn.
Well, you got to put in your 10,000 hours, right?
Yeah.
But this is actually where our philosophers have been. That's who have that, you know, where we have allowed ourselves some freedom to imagine a different kind of world.
Yeah.
Is through art, right? So whether it's musicians or painters, movie makers, oh my goodness, they play a huge role in this transformation that we're undergoing right now.
Yeah.
Huge.
So in all these periods of reality, like I think it's in the hymn in Ashaji that there's a point where it talks about the where it talks about like the end of times, and you know it talks about like this kind of apocalyptic thing where you know everybody or a change, like a it's the wheel is turning, you know, the wheel is always turning. um
Yeah.
so so I guess my question is, how do we decide what time period it is? Is it based on history? Is it based on intuition? Is it what's it based on? Like how do we decide this is what this time period is, or what it represents, or what it, you know?
um I think we know it in a collective kind of fashion based on a number of things. So according to the Mayan calendar, right, the last age ended December 12th, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
That's the last date on the calendar. That calendar was made to represent an age. Wasn't it a random, oh, you know, here's 1972. No, it's a much bigger, it was a much bigger thing. And like that, there are other ways that people have mapped the ages, and that knowledge exists. It's out there. It's like it's in the Vedas, right? Of how long is an age? When does it turn? Does it turn like that in 1 year? Is there a phase period, right? All that knowledge is out there, right? It's just a matter of um, how we interpret it, and how we interpret it it changes according to where our consciousness level is. And now let's say, I would say that in this time period right now, we're moving towards like unity and unconditional love consciousness, right? So when you're vibrating up higher, right, you affect everything around you. Now, if we think about it as collective consciousness vibrating higher, then our concerns, the things that motivate us as a group, will be of a higher vibration. There'll be things that we're more concerned with. I think there's also a piece about fear and how fear actually cuts us off from our intuition. Okay, so if we're saying that intuition is important in order to access other knowledge that we have, then as your vibration gets higher, which is why then again spiritual practice is really important, you can make that connection. Right now, if we're doing that collectively as a group, right, then you know we are definitely shifting and moving. I would say so. That's on the human level. On the planetary level, you can feel it. She's moving every day, right? The Schumann frequencies have gone up, right? So the Earth herself is vibrating higher, right? And you know she's gonna you know there's records in history of her having tilted on her axis, of you know huge things having happened, like giant floods, or you know pole shifts, yeah, having happened through history. It's all that information is out there, right? But I think this is actually, so there's that. Then the Earth herself is in a dance with the other planets, right? And if you are anybody who tracks astrologists or spiritual astrologists these days, They're totally, they're totally on it. This is what they're talking about, is the age shift, and what planet is doing what, where, and what it's influencing at a particular period in time. And then you add to that original knowledge from Aboriginal peoples, right? You know, the Native Americans have been saying for, must be decades now, that we are in the time of the quickening. So the quickening is where time literally speeds up. And it is a time that was foretold to come before the next age shift. Right? It's this knowledge, it's out there. It's in the stories we've been telling for generations. Right? So even Ashaji is a nugget of that story.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the truth is everywhere if you really look for it.
Yeah. I mean, it really all depends on what your canvas is, right? If you are painting with a fear brush, that's the information you'll access, right? If you are painting with a love brush, that's where you'll go. That's what you'll access. That's just how this is. It's how we're wired. We're unique in that way, right? Because I think, you know, as our geneticists are trying to figure out our DNA and what the hell it all means, this whole idea that we have a junk DNA is bullshit. It's absolute bullshit, right? It's all useful to something. We just don't know what technologies are embedded in that. What spiritual technologies are embedded in that DNA? I want to know. Right? What technologies are embedded that have to do with self-healing, regeneration of cells? You know, how are those, you know, where are these things turned off? How can we turn them back on? Right? And I don't know. I didn't go to medical school or whatever. This is intuitive. All of this stuff is intuitive. It's what what's come through so strongly for me. And it's like, yeah, this is, you know, it's true somewhere in the universe. I just don't know what it is yet. Don't know what it looks like yet. And the other thing I don't know is how many lifetimes have I been working at trying to figure out that puzzle?
You know, I wonder, you know, the people that have been able to access things like the memories of their past lives and the ability to quote unquote see beyond, you know,
Yeah.
th- how much of that is their imagination and how much of it really happened, you know? And I know that's that.
Oh.
I know
So
that's
you just said something. You just said something that's about, stop and ask yourself where that came from. How much is their imagination? That's
well,
a
imagine.
very
Well,
judgment loaded statement.
well,
In
no,
my opinion.
I mean it. I mean it from a good place because
No, hold on.
our imagination actually is our reality. Because what we imagine and what we want for ourselves is what happens, right?
Then have you not just answered your own question?
Yeah, I did just answer my own question.
Yeah. So it's only when you separate imagination out from this as something that is less than or not as real as this tangible thing I'm touching, right? That's when that statement has a question in it.
Right, right, right. Because it's not even a question up to that point.
No, no,
That distinction is a, well, it's a false distinction. It's one that's been made by people that are trying to subjugate or divide or conquer people that are using their intuition and their imagination. And
that's right. And why? And why? Why? Because we actually have the capacity to manifest for ourselves what we need without having to be a slave on a hamster wheel. Oh my goodness. What if that was actually true? Right? What if we didn't have to be subjugated? What if those who are subjugating us are actually beings who cannot generate their own?
and therefore need
Yet,
others.
and therefore not need others, but specifically us, because we can. What if we are being enslaved because of what's in our junk DNA? The capacity to manifest, right? And I'm not talking about things that I'm just pulling out of my hat. The entire philosophy of alchemy is that the capacity to manifest.
It's
Whether we're
not,
talking
well, I
about,
mean, and of course, the most, when people talk about alchemy, they think about, oh, we're turning base metals into gold or something like that. But really, that's a
it's a,
metaphor. It's a
it
metaphor.
is,
It's
yeah,
it's it's saying that, you actually have the capacity to do that, of yourself, of your spirit, of your knowledge, of your imagination.
yes. But there's a rule. There are rules. There's ways that you are to do it, right? And the lead stuff is all of the stuff that vibrates low. It's basically, how do you take that low vibration and vibrate it up? Because when you're in that up vibration, that's where you manifest. Because that's when you're in alignment with source. That's when you're in alignment with the flow. That's when you manifest.
Yeah.
Right? So if we all have that capacity, right? We don't need no priest, don't need no, we don't need any of that. Because we're free. We are actually free to do those things, to be. And to explore.
and and I mean, that's, a lot of people might think that's profound, but that's as obvious as it could possibly be, if we really think about it. That's the only way that it could possibly be, is that we all have the ability and the capacity to be free to, to choose our reality, and to be the masters of our consciousness. Because nobody else really, uh, nobody else uh, should have the ability to tell us that we're less than, you know
Yes. Right? And you think about, where those messages come from, and you think about how bullies work,
yeah.
right?
It's funny.
It's,
That message is, that messaging is embedded everywhere. It's on television, it's
yeah,
on billboards, it's in
yeah,
it's everywhere. And so
yeah,
you have to be conscious of the fact that it exists, and say, look, this is not, I don't accept it. This is not, this is, I disagree with this.
yeah, absolutely. Right? I mean, uh, I think it's getting easier, because I do think the vibration of this planet is rising. Schumann frequencies, right? They're just, you cannot be on a being, because I believe the planet is a being. She wants to vibrate up, right? So those who make the transformation and make that journey with her will be able to be on the surface of this planet and still be in resonance. For those of us who cannot, for whom that's a difficult journey, yeah, and then it might be, whatever would come up to be able to check out of the game, right? And then you get to go play this game somewhere else on another planet that's okay about going through that thing, that experience. That's how I think about it, because I don't think we are the only beings,
No.
right? Animals are beings, plants are beings, trees, the planet herself is a being,
The universe.
suns are beings, yeah, right? We're a really complicated being called the universe, called source. That's in Islam right there, right? Why did I create? Because I wanted to be known. Ah, right? So we're one being understanding itself. And then what if there's more beings like this understanding themselves? Then it brings up the whole thing of like parallel universes and parallel timelines and all of that really cool science fiction stuff.
Well, and ironically, all the things that have been science fiction have sort of been become reality. So, so
Yeah,
so I think the idea of jumping through different times, and you know, and coming from different time periods. I think that already exists. I think we we don't know how to access it, or maybe it exists in our midst, in our reality, but we just don't recognize it.
Well, I think it exists depending on which game you're playing.
That's true. That's exactly right.
Because maybe you have a time jumping avatar to play that game. You have to play a different game. Right? Like this is not a time jumping avatar. Right? So this one is gonna, you know, walk around with a shovel and plant trees and make some art, and you know, that's what this avatar is gonna do. Right? But you know, if you know my life force was wanting to go have a different experience, maybe that would be a choice. Man, let's go do some time jumping. Yeah, that's cool. Let's do that. Maybe I even do this while this body is sleeping.
Yeah. Oh, that's well, there you go. Because dreams, and like, you have weird dreams, and dreams. Some people believing in interpreting dreams. You know that you have.
Yeah, I get some of my best ideas through my dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah, often when I'm stuck with, you know, something I'm trying to design, I just put it into the dream scope,
Right.
and something will come back.
Yeah.
And then yes, you do have to learn how to interpret, because it's the language of intuition that you're actually interpreting.
Right.
Right? That's what's going on there. Because you're being given a pictorial language, more or less. Yes, there are words involved, but there are words and feelings involved, right? So you're being given a landscape while you sleep by you. You're giving you, your unconscious whatever is giving you a landscape.
And nightmares.
And then there's a whole, nightmares are, there are different types of dreams, right? Because there are the dreams that are stress releasers, right? That's very often nightmares. There's dreams that are information passing, right? So that, you know, you're telling you something you need to know in your waking life, right? And then there are dreams that I call status reports. So what they are is they're showing you something that's either like part of past karma, or something you've been working at clearing out, or something you've been working on, and it's giving you a status report of this is where it's at. This is how far you've gotten. This is, here's another area where some other work is happening, or, you know, and you'll dream symbols that are they're repeated symbols. So when you're beginning the process of trying to remember your dreams and write them down or whatever, that's one of the things to notice, is what symbols are repeated, right? Like I have one of my symbols that's repeated often is cars. I'm in a car, I'm in a vehicle, and very often it represents my body, right? Another one would be houses, right? And the houses have different floors. So there's this, like a basement is the subconscious, you know, the mid zone is your middle of the house, and then your mind. So your heart, your mind, intuition, subconscious. And various times I'll have these dreams that are status reporty, like the entire basement is being renovated, right? So the how I'm going to access my intuition is being literally turned upside down. And here's the status report. This is what we're working on, right? So that kind of thing. But you kind of learn to read the symbols. I also have repeating symbols with places. So whenever I dream of East Africa, that is like point of origin, right? And point of origin, like in this lifetime kind of deal. And then I have another one like which has birthplace, which is kind of like soul birthplace, right? So when I go to visit these different places, there's some particular kind of event going on in those. And so anyways, we each would have a different set of recurring symbols.
Right.
So if you're able to remember them and write them down, you'll be able to discover what your recurring symbols are.
Right. Well, thank you so much for
Was that? Is
Thank you.
that too much information?
No, no, no. This was exactly this was exactly the kind of conversation, that I wanted to capture. And I didn't know where it would come from, or who would have this kind of conversation, that would delve into these subjects. But I'm so glad that it happened. And it's given me lots to think about. And
As it was meant to be.
yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for inviting me for this conversation. It's been quite delicious, actually. Meaty, delicious.
Yes. Likewise, I agree. And spicy. Good spices used.
Yeah, there's enough spice in it. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely some cinnamon.
At least.
Oh, and I loved all the accents. The accents were so entertaining. I love them.
I think it's just I grew up in a family that did accents, right?
Built
So it was very much,
built-in comedic value.
oh my God, yeah.
You could have. I mean, if you wanted to be a comedian, you would have been an incredible comedian. I mean, hey, it's never too late. You could.
Hey, that's true.
You know.
Maybe I could work, comedy and philosophy. I could be
Yeah.
like, female George Carlin.
Yeah,
Like,
I would
maybe.
love that. That would be so hip. Like, I would pay to come see that show.
Well, we'll see where my journey takes me, man.
Yeah, we will. And thank you for agreeing to be part of this. And I'll send you a link as soon as it's uploaded.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Peace out, man.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.